Hi everybody, I'm the Idea Maker, and today I'm going to be talking about the lessons that we've gotten from Season 1, Episode 4 of Everybody Loves Raymond. So there's a couple of things that I do want to go over with this episode. So there's a lot of things. So we're going to talk about the IQ test. We're going to talk about what's better in the marriage. Is a happy marriage considered when the man is happier or smarter than the woman? Also what it's really like on really taking advantage of the person or the people that you love. And do you think that Robert was right with taking the test, for giving the test, or having to, do this whole thing in general? So we're definitely going to dive into these lessons, and we're going to take a look at what exactly I feel that I think that this all had to do with. There's a lot of things that I really, really want to go over, but we're definitely going to condense it down to a good amount of minutes. And just because that there's so much to talk about, but I can be able to sum it up in a smaller amount of words, that I hope that maybe this will get the point across over a broad section of this podcast episode, or just a broad section of everything else that we're about to go talk about. So without further ado, let's go ahead and go into our first topic, which I'm going to combine a couple of things. So basically this one's going to be the summary of the IQ test. So the IQ test is basically a test that Robert was giving, or in this case, it was an exercise that he was giving, just so he could be able to be promoted to sergeant, either captain or sergeant. So in here, it was an interesting thing that Ray didn't really want to help Robert in this. And honestly, I could understand with Deborah why that it's a good idea to help him. I think that the family should always be wanting to go and help and participate in the things that are going to help boost your morality, to help boost your way to success. I think it's a good thing. And on top of it, it's also something that we as people have to remember, that I know that when some people, when they become famous, or when they become very, very popular, or when they become rich, they always like to think that, oh, I got here because I got here. Or maybe that's not how everybody thinks, but that's how a good chunk amount of people think. But we also have to realize that the reason why we're here in this position is because of the people that helped us to get there. I mean, in the world of engineering, and as I can put it from my own experience, when I went to the university to go and study in engineering, the thing that I learned about was what's called accessibility testing. So there's accessibility tests, there's beta tests. What I learned over at the university was about testing, and it's such a good thing to take these tests, or at least test the further product. So at one point I was working on a website, and I still am working on a website where it's a bunch of different things that I don't really want to get into specifics about. So I actually once had to do a website project for a class that I'm actually currently still working on the side. And the thing is that from there, I had to do what was known as accessibility testing. So accessibility testing is when you go and you ask these different people, whether it's friends, family, anybody that you trust. And the thing is that you have for them to go and start testing these things out. And you have for them to go and let you point out what's the flaws that we have in it, what's the benefits, what's some improvements, what are the things you want to keep, what are the things that you want to take out. And the thing is that with this exercise that Robert was trying to do, so that way he can get the credits, so that way he can be promoted to sergeant or to captain, was that he wanted somebody, or at least some people, to be able to participate in the test. And it's interesting that I think that with this leads to the next topic, but at the same time, it also makes you wonder, was this the right approach to take? And I think that the standard deviation test, or the IQ test, or whatever you want to call it, I think that it was a good thing that he did this, especially with coming to people like with his own brother Ray, with his sister-in-law Deborah, with his parents Maria and Frank. I think that it was a good thing. And it's such a nice thing when you have your family to go and help back you up, and they want to help you succeed in life. And it's not a bad thing. In my opinion, it is not a bad thing for you wanting to go and ask for help from other different people. And it's such a good thing. And this leads to my next section, which is going to be about, was Robert right about this approach? Was he right in the approach of having to do the deception between them on saying, oh, the scores were mixed up, or this is your score, this is your score, the test was all fake? Was he in the right? So, do I think that Robert was in the right? If this is an assignment that he has to do in order for him to be made captain or sergeant, I think it was captain or sergeant. No, he said sergeant. Okay, well, anyways, for this exercise, I believe that Robert was right. And the reason why I say that is because that if this is actually an assignment that had to be done and it was studying human behavior, then with all further respect, I actually would have to give it to him. And I would say that yes, he's in the right. And I do believe that it's important for you to do the tests and do the activities correctly if you want to have the results that are needed. And of course, it's interesting how I don't know if this is how they do it over at a police academy or over in the police department, but if you guys would like to go and comment on this, if they actually do activities like this, then please comment down below what exactly that they do, if it's correct, if it's not correct, and let me know exactly what happens so that way I can understand it. But anyways, I do believe that Robert was in the right. So, of course, he was in the right about it, and I think that it was a good idea because if it was studying human behavior and it was like a psychological portion of it, then it was a good thing because of the fact that from there, he would get the result that he needs, and on top of it, it does relate to some way about criminal suspicion or criminal activity when it comes to those who their moralities have been lowered or their self-image has been deprecated to the point that it's where their self-image has been demoted or lowered down to the point that it really kind of makes them judge themselves more harshly or more difficultly or more difficult to the point that they probably might confess to their crimes, or they might actually just confess to any other different thing that they've done. And of course, it's always different for every single person, but it's not always going to be the exact same thing. And of course, I mean, people will have all their different opinions, and they'll go and say all these different things about this. And I completely respect everybody's opinions, especially if you guys are saying in the comment Robert was in the wrong, if he was in the right. I mean, I personally believe he was in the right just because it was just an assignment that he was having to do. I think that if he is having to do it and he wants to be promoted to sergeant, then that's the best way to go. And if it has to be done, it has to be done. So I am going to, if I was in his position, he asked me, I would actually go and tell him, yes, go ahead and do this so that way I can go and help you out with these results. If it resulted in any other type of human behavior, of course, the results are going to vary and they're going to differ amongst people. And it is going to be different. And of course, sometimes, which this is going to be the next section, which is going to be about the results and the effects of the IQ test. Is it normal for this type of human behavior to happen? Is it normal for sometimes for people to fight? And that's going to lead into several different sections. So this is going to be part one of a little bit of a section that I'm going to call part one of the IQ test. Are the results normal? All right. So, were the results normal in the IQ test when it came to human behavior? I think that they were. I think that us as humans, we are developed by God, or we're developed in general, or if you, depending on how you believe, but I'm going to be expressing it to both. I think that us as humans, we have the tendency to always be jealous of other different people, and whether if it has to do with popularity, or whether it has to do with views, or whether it has to do with who feels more successful, or who has a better self-image, or all these other different things. Who has this? Who has that? Why don't I have this? Why do I have that? I mean, there's a lot of us. Every single person will always be jealous and envious of somebody else, especially when it comes to who's smarter than somebody else. And I think that with this whole entire thing, it's very interesting to see the human behavior between if you're smarter than somebody else, or compared to the opposite way on how they feel that if they're dumber than somebody else. And it's like seeing this with between Ray and Deborah, and seeing this between Marie and Frank. And of course, I always want to feel that it's very important to get to understand that, yeah, of course, we're always going to feel jealous about if somebody has something that we don't, or if somebody's smarter than us, or we feel like if somebody is belittling us or putting us on this smaller platform while they're being treated on a high pedestal. Of course, we're always going to feel like that. And that's something that, us as human beings, we have to recognize and we have to understand. And I don't really like to say that it's always going to be the case with every single person. Sure, there are going to be people that are going to shrug it off, and there are going to be people who are really just going to just let it be. So I can't really speak up for every single person, but I do feel like the majority of us, or a good amount of us, are always going to feel more jealous or more envious of somebody else, even hatred towards somebody else. And that's a big thing when it comes to tests like these. It's like with an upcoming episode that I remember of Everybody Loves Raymond, where sometimes there are even things like normal activities that'll sometimes even go and they'll separate us, and they'll go and they'll ruin friendships or relationships. And it's pretty crazy that stuff like this will let ourselves ruin ourselves. And it's just crazy to think. But anyways, now that we've already established that are these results something that are normal in this case, part 2, I'm going to say for this one, for the IQ test, is part 2 of it is where I'm going to put saying Ray's point of is a marriage better when the man is smarter? All right. So, honestly, it's a very chauvinistic question. It's a male chauvinistic question. And I don't believe that a marriage is happier when one spouse is happier than the other. I really don't believe that. I feel like the marriage is happier when both people are happy, when they're truly, truly in love with each other, and they really believe that this is it. Like, this is their relationship, that it's founded on a good base of understanding, of communication, of wisdom. And I feel like even with whoever is smarter than the other, I mean, Deborah's right. Even though you're not smart in one thing, you could also be smarter in something else. And in this case, I do agree with Frank on the case that sometimes street smarts are better. Street smarts are definitely going to take you to places, yes. And a lot of the times, sometimes people will feel that even when it comes to school, like, people sometimes think, oh, these things I'm not going to learn later on in life. And actually, that's going to come and bite us right in the butt one day. Even if it comes to something like math, I know a lot of people do not like math because it can look overwhelming and it can look overcomplicated. I honestly was one of those people that I really didn't like math to a point. I love math, but the thing is that I don't like it when it's taught wrong, or I don't like it when it's the professor that goes and teaches the concept of you can only do this one way in this class in order to pass the class. I honestly believe that with math, there's multiple ways you can do it. And in the real world, you cannot just do it in one way. You have to learn every single way, because if you don't, then there's going to be a lot of conflicts, because sometimes maybe someone's going to be asking you how to do something and it has math related concepts and you don't know how to do one way because they never taught you, or they didn't want you to learn that way, or they didn't want you to teach yourself, or they didn't want to teach you about it. And it's interesting to see that these different things could really impact us. But see, I don't believe that a good marriage relies, or a happy marriage, I don't believe that it relies on just smarts. I believe that it also relies on communication, on good relationship goals. I do believe that it more relates to that than anything. And there's no way that you could say that it doesn't. There's no way that you say that it can't. Especially because that relationships should be healthy. There should be no toxicity between two people. It's honestly one of the stupidest things, in my opinion, that if you go ahead and you go and you stay in this toxic environment, I mean, I cannot fully say that it's a stupid thing, because out of personal experience, I mean, I've known some people that they've been in toxic relationships, and sometimes they've had to stay there for a long time. just because of the circumstances, the time period, the time era. Sometimes it's difficult, but it doesn't mean that it's going to affect you personally. And I think that a happy marriage more has to not just deal with the relationship on being good between two people, but I also believe that another important thing is the communication between two people. And the communication has to be very open-minded. And when I mean that it has to be very open-minded is that there cannot be this hostility or this closed-minded one-way track of thoughts into having to understand your perspective and the other person's perspective. And it's something that a lot of people don't tend to have these days. Maybe there are a lot of people that do. So I'm not going to say that there's going to be a lot of people that don't. But I'm also going to say that it's important that with this specific thing in general, I do believe that what Ray said is a male chauvinistic and very sexist remark. Of course, there are people who still think that way because, I mean, that's how they think. Maybe they program themselves to think that way. I can't say for certain if that was the way for everybody else. But in this case, I mean, Ray can be chauvinistic and he can be very sexist. And on top of it, he can be very manipulative. And in an example of having to take the test and saying that he's dumber than Deborah, he was trying to make his way out of it. And that's going to be another concept that I want to do after this part. So the next part that I'm going to do, and I'm going to keep a note of using your spouse for one thing. I'm going to use it as another different thing. But the third thing that I want to get to is street smarts. Is Frank right about the street smarts? So, I do believe that Frank is right about having street smarts. So I did go over a little bit in the other thing. I did go over in the previous section of this part, but I do want to say that street smarts is equally important. In some cases, it's more important when it comes to it. I do agree to it. Not every single time you're going to be relying on street smarts, especially when it comes to a job that it has to deal statistically with an education. But you are going to have street smarts involved. And you're also going to have street smarts involved in your life. So I would definitely say that street smarts are a good thing. It's a very, very good thing. That I think that they should have street smarts be tested in school because honestly, I feel like Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they really don't have that much street smarts. There's very, very few parents that'll give them the lessons to being street smart to begin with. But it's not something that we see every single day. For example, there are kids that they'll go into stores after school and they'll just go start trashing the place. And like if they really want to get kicked out, like they think that it's funny, but it's not funny. It's ridiculous. It's honestly very, very stupid. It's very dangerous, especially when it comes to them, when it comes to other people, especially on them. It's very dangerous because on the point that you're seeing that they just really don't care about themselves, that they don't care about their lives, they don't care about their future. It doesn't seem like they do, and they just go and they just try to throw things away. It's ridiculous on seeing that so many different of these kids, they don't even want to think about a future ahead of them, and they just want to throw it away. They don't care. They don't care about the music that they listen to. They don't care about so many different things. They don't even care about their own health. They don't care about their mental health, their physical health, their spiritual health, their emotional health. They just want to go and just ruin it more. And also the thing is that as parents, parents need to understand their children. They need to be more open-minded with them. They need to be open with them. And they need to at least give them the love and the attention that they need, but they also have to discipline them correctly. They really, really need to. When they do something wrong, they need to be disciplined no matter what. And I do agree that Frank is right that street smarts have to be taught in schools. They need to be taught so that way us as people, we could live better amongst each other. And I mean, that's why sometimes people in the baby boomers community or those who were born in like the 70s, the 80s, I mean, they look down on people like us from like millennials and all these other different ones because, I mean, we're the next generation. And look at us. We're already looking down on Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And it's crazy to think that we're already doing so because of the fact that they have all these terms, they have all these different whatevers, and now we're already in that point where it's like, oh great, here we go. I don't get it, but whatever. I'm not going to want to talk like that, or I don't want to experience that, or I don't want to do this because I don't feel comfortable with it. I mean, there's some things from Gen Alpha and Gen Z that can be good, but it doesn't mean that everything's going to be good. So you just have to take that into consideration, and you have to think about what's the good and what's the bad. It's like back during this episode when it came out. There was good and there was bad. Same with now in 2024. But we just have to understand these things, and we have to think this out. We can't just always be closed-minded, but we also can't be open-minded to the point that we're going to mess up our lives and our futures. So yes, I do agree with Frank on this. Now, I'm going to go back to a topic that I was discussing about, which was about using the spouse for something. So when you use your spouse or your partner in something, then you're really actually in bringing in more of a toxic and hostile environment, not just to yourself, but also to your spouse/partner or whatever you want to call them. But anyways, we're going to get into the next section, which is going to be disruptive behavior. So I do want to say this for the record. I think that using your spouse or your partner to go and use them for whatever reason to get to your advantage is a cruel thing. I think that in this life, we all have to work for what we earn. I feel like we all have to work towards something that we earn for ourselves, whether it's we worked in our jobs to be able to make income for ourselves or for our families. I believe that we have to work in order for us to eat. Even in the Bible, it says that if you don't work, you don't eat. And there's a lot of other different concepts of if you do not work, then you don't get paid, or you don't get to feed your family, or you don't get to feed yourself, or you don't get to do any of these different things that you need in your life. And it's important for us not to have this type of hostility and this toxic and disgusting type of behavior. Of course, there are going to be people where they are going to abuse their spouse or partner, and they're going to abuse them to the point that they can't even trust them, or they have this mindset about them that it's really going to be very, very hard for them to even think about. But I also do believe that there are some that they try to get out of the situation and they can't for one circumstance or another. And I can't say if it's the right thing or if it's the wrong thing because I'm not in their situation. But I could say that if they need that help, then they should be able to get help from anyone. But it also depends, too, on what kind of resources that they have. Do they have good friends or family? Do they have people that are going to help them, are going to truly help them? Are there going to be people that are going to be out there to support them in all areas of their lives? You have to think about those circumstances, too. And if you don't, then that's really going to take things from one thing to another, and you're just really going to be hurting somebody for the worse. And I don't believe in having to use somebody. I really don't believe it. I was raised to never use anybody for my own advantage, and I don't ever want to do that to anybody, especially when it comes to you guys as the subscribers, especially when it comes to you guys who are wanting to listen to this. I don't agree with using people at all, and I feel like everybody should have their equal amount of time to be able to present themselves and do what they need to do in the right and legal ways to be able to help themselves when it comes to getting to make things better for themselves in a relationship or for themselves or for their family. There's just a lot of things that could go into it that you'd have to understand and realize and think about. So having to use somebody is just very disheartening. It's very tasteless, and it's just horrible to a degree. Well, actually, in general, it's so hard. And who knows? Maybe you're watching this and you're in a toxic relationship that maybe you're getting used by somebody, whether if it's family or if it's just in a romantic relationship or in a marriage. It doesn't, or in a friendship. It doesn't matter. It's toxicity is going to follow everybody wherever they go, and it doesn't even matter where you're at. It's going to follow. You just have to take it into consideration, and you have to think about it. But anyways, those are going to be all the topics that I'm going to discuss about it, especially because there really isn't any other type of discussion I do want to get into about this. I think that I've covered every single one of the whole entire episode within this little time. But I'm glad that you guys are here to listen to this episode of this podcast, and I hope that you guys can be able to return for more and get to come and see what other different topics I'm going to go over from other different Everybody Loves Raymond episodes to just summarize it up. So if you guys really liked it, then if you guys really like this and you guys want to see more, then please like, share, comment, and subscribe onto the channel. And on top of that, if you guys really want to see more of the behind the scenes, or if you guys want to see if I'm going to be uploading, then please follow me on Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, on Discord, on my Discord server, and also on my TikTok accounts, which all the links will be in the description below. And until then, without further ado, thank you guys. God bless you all, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.